Hey everybody. So today on the list for AP prep topics, I'm going to be talking about primitive data types. So the AP test requires knowledge of three primitive data types, the int, double, and Boolean. There are actually five other ones as well, but the test doesn't require knowledge on those. You can learn them and it'll help you on the AP test, but you don't need to know those. So what is a primitive data type? Well, a primitive data type means the fact that it's primitive means that the value is stored directly, as opposed to it just being a reference to a value, which is what is stored in an object name. I'll cover that in another video if you want to watch that. But yeah, so that's basically what a primitive data type is. Now, to start with primitive data types, you have to declare them and initialize them. So I've created a little class here with a basic main method, so I can kind of just mess around in here. And I'm just going to talk about declaring and initializing primitive data types first. So when you declare a data type, first you'll put the keyword of the type it is, which I'll get to that in a second, but you want the name of the variable that you're going to assign a value to. So the name of a variable, well, it starts with either a letter or a $ or an underscore, although most commonly a letter, usually a lowercase letter as well. That's the standard. And then you can add in numbers after that, as long as the first character is a letter. So for example, say you wanted to keep track of, I don't know, how many cars you had. You could create a variable name cars here, and there would be a keyword in front of that, but again, I'll get to that in a second. And then you would use an equal sign to assign something to it, and then a value after that. So obviously you'd have a certain number of cars, so maybe you had 5 cars or 4 cars, and that's read as cars gets 4, the value cars gets 4. So now I'm going to go into each data type specifically. So we'll start with ints. So what is an int? Well, int stands for integer, which an integer is a whole number. So this can be negative or positive or 0. -1 is an integer, 0, 1, 2, as long as there's no decimal. So yeah, -1, 0, any of those work. Integers range from approximately -2 billion to +2 billion, so very wide range there. You're pretty much never going to run out of options. And I'm going to first start out with how you would declare an int. So you start with the keyword int. That shows the program that you're creating a new int value. And say I wanted to count the number of cookies I had. I'll start with lowercase n for num, and then cookies, a capital letter there. And num cookies gets 4. Say I had 4 cookies. And again, that because it's an integer, that could be a negative value or 0 or whatever, even though you can't actually have negative cookies. So we'll go with 4 for now. And then say I had another int, creating a new one, num brownies. And that could be, I don't know, 3. Now, here I could create a third int called, let's say, total pastries, because, I'm counting my pastries here. Int total pastries. That's, and I'm going to go into some arithmetic operators here. Arithmetic operators. And so as in math, you can do various things to them. You can add them, subtract, divide, multiply. So here I could say the total amount of pastries could be num cookies, which that represents the value 4 here, plus, and you just use a plus sign, num brownies. I keep doing that. And so here, yeah, total pastries would get those values, and I'll print it out just so you can see what that would give you. So system dot out dot print line total pastries, and I'm just gonna run this code right here, and you can see that's 7 because it added 3 plus 4 and gave you 7. Now, so that's basic addition. There's also subtraction. So if you have, that wouldn't make sense with the example, but that would give you the value 1. And division is indicated by slash, and multiplication by a little asterisk. So say I had, I don't know, boxes of cookies, right? So just to give you another example here, I could create another int boxes gets num cookies. Actually, sorry, I'm going to make this boxes gets 2. So we have 2 boxes, and then here int total cookies could be num cookies, which is 4, times boxes, which is 2. And here, if I print out total cookies and run this code, that'll give you 8, which it just printed out right there, because two boxes of 4 cookies each. And lastly, we have, so there's addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. And lastly, we have modulo, which basically returns a remainder. So that's indicated by a percentage sign. And again, that's, it doesn't make much sense for the example, but say I put modulo here, total cookies equals num cookies modulo boxes. So 4 modulo 2. Well, 4 divided by 2 is 2, but there's no remainder there. So here modulo equals 0. But say num cookies was 5. 5 divided by 2 is 2, with a remainder of 1. So here, if I printed out this code, this would return 1, because there is modulo is basically the remainder there. So now I'm going to go on to the next data type we have, which is doubles. Now doubles are kind of like ints. Usually, they're just basic numbers. Doubles are indicated by the keyword double in the beginning instead of int. So say I wanted a double value that was called num cakes, I don't know. Again, it's declared the same way, just the keyword double instead of int. And then I don't know, 1 cake. Now the thing with doubles is that, sorry, but that actually would not be correct, because the thing with doubles is that they have a decimal. So it would be 1.0, or 1.1, 1.23435, whatever you want there. Or also, again, negatives. Again, it doesn't make sense to have negative 1.23435 cakes, but that's a valid number for a double. And something noteworthy is that when you perform an arithmetic operation with a double and an int, it'll return a double. So I'm just going to get rid of that statement there. Say I did have 1 cake, and here I'll say total pastries. Now remember, pastries was already declared up here with the int keyword, so I don't need to write int again because it already exists. I'm just going to use the term total pastries gets num cakes plus, I'll just add the num cookies. So what this is doing is adding 1.0 plus 5. And then I could print out total pastries again. But this isn't going to give you 6. It's going to give you, oh, what did I do here? Oh, okay. Yeah, so what you want to do, sorry, this actually has to be a double because you're adding a double into, you're creating a double. So I'm going to get rid of the first one because this here is a double, so the result is going to have to be a double. So I'm going to recreate total pastries as a double. And when I print that out, that's going to give you 6.0 because when you add a double and an int, the result is always going to be a double. And one thing I forgot to mention is if you declare a value, so say you declared an int pairs, just because, and you didn't assign it a value, it would automatically be 0. And if you declared a double but you didn't initialize it, it would be 0.0. So those are the values that those get. Now I'm just going to erase this because we don't need any of this anymore. And I'm going to go on to the last primitive data type that we're going to cover, which is the Boolean. So Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N. And this is the keyword for the last type. So a Boolean is either going to be true or false. The word Boolean, it just means true or false, named after the person who created this. So a Boolean value generally starts with the word is or something like that because you're asking the question, is it true or is it false? So let's say Boolean, is this cool? And again, so if you don't initialize it here, it's going to automatically be false. But this is pretty cool, so I'm just going to say, is this cool? Gets true. And operations for Boolean values, there are multiple ones. So actually, I'm going to create another Boolean here. Is that awesome? I don't know. And we'll give that one true as well. So now I can compare the Boolean values and print out results of that. So I'm just going to start with the print statement here. That print line. And here I can put a statement that compares the two values. So is this cool is the first one. And this is the first operator that can compare them. So two and symbols. Is this cool and is that awesome? So this is going to print out true because what the double and symbol does is if both of these values are true, it returns true. However, if one is false, one is true, or if they're both false, it'll return false. So just to show you how that works, this is going to print out true right here, as you can see. Now another, and actually I'm just going to change one of these to false just to show you that that does not work the same way. This will return false. Sorry, let me go back here. And as you can see, that one printed out false. Now, another operator you can use is OR. So that's represented by two vertical lines. And this will return true if at least one of the values is true. So right now it will return true because this one's true and this one is false. And I'm not going to go to the trouble of running that through the code because I can just tell you what it will be. However, if they were both false, then it would return false. So at least one has to be true for this to return true, or if both are true, it will return true. And there are a couple of other operators to compare Boolean values, but the last one that I'm going to show you is the double equals sign, and this just tells you if they're both the same. So false and false, that will give you true because they are the same, and if it's true and true, they will also give you true. However, if they're different, that will not work. So these are basically just some of the basic primitive data types that you'll be tested on the AP test. And again, there are some other ones, but you don't really need to know those. And this is just a basic overview. You can go into greater depth if you'd like to, but this should be a good starting point. So thanks everybody, and I hope you watch some of our other videos.